Hello, I'm Dennis Shinolu, and this is your 3 p.m. news and sports update for 1680's The Crow. Police in Vancouver says a man who has been charged with attempted murder in a downtown East Side shooting over the weekend. They say officers have been working along East Hastings Street Sunday afternoon when the 31-year-old victim was shot repeatedly. They say the victim, who is known to police, was expected to survive after being taken to hospital, while officers arrested the suspect soon after he fled the area. Police say 32-year-old Jamie George Guimond has been charged and remains in custody, with a court appearance scheduled on Friday. Sheshat First Nations is announcing the results of Phase 1 of their scanning of the former Port Alberni residential school grounds. Kiara Collins reports.
On the day of Orange Shirt Day, Sheshat welcomed survivors and residents of Port Alberni to Matma's gym to announce the preliminary results of the penetrating radar which scanned the grounds of the former Alberni residential school. This project began nearly 18 months ago, and the results are only from scanning 13% of the land. We are expected to hear from Chief Councillor Ken Watts and others about the results. More information to come this afternoon. Kiara Collins, 1680 The Crow.
As of a written press release this afternoon, a minimum of 67 children have been found in this phase alone. A family day trip to the mountains could have ended tragically for stranded hikers at Lynn Peak. David Nava with the story.
A group of 5 hikers in their 20s was rescued in the early hours of this Tuesday from Lynn Peak. According to North Shore Rescue, the group was unfamiliar with the trail and didn't have the right gear for the cold conditions. Due to the weather conditions, the rescue mission got complicated, and North Shore Rescue team leader Mike Danks explains what happened.
It took a few hours for ground crews to actually make it to where the subjects were, and by that time, 2 of the 5 had become very hypothermic and were not able to move anymore. So a helicopter was dispatched to a hoist extraction.
Danks insists that it is extremely important for hikers to be prepared to get stuck overnight, and if you are in a group, don't split. 2 important lessons these hikers learned today. David Nava, 1680 The Crow.
We are joined now with David Nava. David, how crucial was the helicopter to bringing the hikers home safely?
Hello, Dennis. Well, talking with Mike and the helicopter company that helps North Shore Rescue, they both agree that being able to send a helicopter overnight is game-changing. Before, they weren't able to do that, and rescue missions overnight could lead to hours. Now, extractions can be done within minutes.
So, how were the extractions done before?
Well, it was just last October that the government regulations changed and allowing now the helicopters dispatching. But before, ground crews were the ones that were in charge to locate the subjects and then provide care until sunset. This led, first of all, obviously, to risky missions of the ground crew trying to discover the subject or locate the subjects. And then, of course, providing care for hours until the sunrise could have led to this mission today and others during the past few months to way different outcomes.
Thank you, David. A new exhibition opened this long weekend in North Vancouver. Our reporter Shivani Joshi checked it out.
7 volunteers with the Museum and Archives of North Vancouver put together an exhibition called Voices of Diversity. It features stories about newcomers to North Vancouver through photography and interview, exploring themes such as belonging, culture, and art from the perspective of newcomers. Zora Hagbin, one of the volunteers, said this project was very helpful to her as it helped her connect to her new community.
I'm sure many of the newcomers, when they follow this project and they see our interviews and our work, they can get something out of it and know their community more and know about the challenges and how they can continue their life and get used to their new country.
This exhibition will be on display at the Museum of North Vancouver until March 5th. Shivani Joshi, 1680 The Crow.
The Surrey Police want a better look at the finances for the city of Surrey. Reporter Seamus Page has more.
Surrey Chief Constable Norm Lipinski is requesting an external audit of the City of Surrey's general operating and capital budget for 2023 to 2027. The issue comes from the Surrey Police Force attempting to transition from a contracted federally operated RCMP to a municipal service. However, the city made its budgets under the assumption that they would be retaining an RCMP force. The city cited that it would be $235 million less to use the RCMP compared to the use of municipal forces. Surrey Police Services believe that there is a massive discrepancy between their own financial research and the city's and would like to see it investigated. Mayor of Surrey, Brenda Locke, believes that this attempt to transition is misguided and costs the residents and businesses of Surrey more than it should, and that this, in conjunction with the new 2.9% property tax rate, is not doable for the city. Seamus Page, 1680, The Crow.
The Manitoba government is adding 10 positions to its prosecution service, with special focus on violence and gun-related crime. Justice Minister Kevin Gertson said that new positions will include a Crown attorneys who will specialize in areas such as the trafficking of firearms.
This $1.4 million investment in Manitoba prosecution services will help address the capacity to deal with these violent crimes and where there are illegal firearms involved.
Gertson, says the new personnel could be in place within a few months to ease the burden of a high workload. Canada's annual inflation rate slowed to 5.9% in January, despite grocery prices rising at an even faster pace last month. The Canadian Press's Lisa Laporte has a story.
Statistics Canada says headline inflation was down from 6.3% in December, noting the annual inflation rate will continue to slow in the coming months. The last time inflation was below 6% was in February of last year, when it was at 5.7%. The headline rate came in lower in January than many commercial banks were anticipating in their forecasts, signaling good news for the Bank of Canada. From the Canadian Press Business Desk, I'm Lisa Laporte.
Two different U.S. Supreme Court cases are being heard that could reshape how some internet companies handle their content moderation. Reporter Julie Walker has more.
In the case heard Tuesday, the Supreme Court seemed unlikely to side with the family of a student killed in a terror attack that wants to sue YouTube for helping spread ISIS videos. Justices like Elena Kagan seemed concerned about upending the internet and their interpretation of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act.
Why is it that the tech industry gets a pass? A little bit unclear. On the other hand, we're a court. We really don't know about these things. These are not like the 9 greatest experts on the internet.
Kagan says Congress, not the court, should make changes. The case Wednesday involves another terrorist attack and prompted a lawsuit against Twitter, Facebook, and Google. I'm Julie Walker.
U.S. government regulators have taken charge of the cleanup of a trail derailment in Ohio that exposed the community of East Palestine to potentially hazardous chemicals. Environmental Protection Agency boss Michael Regan has ordered Norfolk Southern Railway to take all available measures to clean up contaminated air and water.
In no way, shape, or form will Norfolk Southern get off the hook for the mess that they created.
Regan says that the EPA will perform the work itself and seek triple damages from Norfolk if the railway fails to comply. U.S. President Joe Biden spoke from Warsaw, Poland this morning and pledged that the United States and its allies would have Ukraine's back as the war with Russia soon enters its second year.
1 year ago, the world was bracing for the fall of Kyiv. Well, I just come from a visit to Kyiv, and I can report Kyiv stands strong. Kyiv stands proud. It stands tall. And most important, it stands free.
His remarks come one day after his unannounced trip to Kyiv. Before Biden's speech in Warsaw, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced that Moscow would suspend its participation in the last remaining nuclear arms control pact with the U.S. Authorities in Philadelphia say an 18-year-old suspect has been officially charged in the death of a Temple University police officer shot near campus. Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner outlined some of the charges Miles Pfeiffer is facing. I'm Dennis Shinolu, and thank you for listening to BCIT News The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
Everything everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikki-King.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretanero.
And I'm Radhika Sikki-King. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
This is sports on 1680 The Crow.
Welcome back to 1680 The Crow. Now shifting to sports as the Vancouver Canucks take on the Nashville Predators on the road tonight. The Canucks are coming off a 6-2 victory against the Philadelphia Flyers this past weekend. Elias Pettersson led the way with 2 goals and 3 assists against the Flyers and looks to carry over his momentum to tonight's matchup. Tennis Canada President and Chief Executive Officer Michael Downey announced Tuesday that he will retire at the end of the year. Canadian tennis players have enjoyed considerable success during Downey's 15 years as the head of the organization. His second term as president and CEO, which started in 2017, includes Bianca Andreescu's 2019 U.S. Open victory and Canada's first Davis Cup final last year. Downey joined Tennis Canada in 2004, and his first term saw the development of the National Tennis Center, which developed the young tennis stars of the president. The Chicago Bulls have announced that Lonzo Ball will not be returning to the court this season. The Bulls guard has long been dealing with issues in his left knee for over a year. Ball had 2 surgeries on his knee at this point, coming at the start and end of 2022. His last game played was on January 14th of last year. Chicago now looks to resolve all discomfort for Ball by the start of next season. The Champions League round of 16 continues with 2 matches today. Liverpool take on Real Madrid in Anfield for a rematch for the last Champions League final. Although last time they faced each other, Real Madrid was also the favorite, now the odds seem to be more in favor of the Spaniard team. Liverpool currently sits 8th on the Premier League, clearly out of the championship race and not playing the same football that has brought them many successes in the past few years. In the other game of the day, Napoli will visit Eintracht Frankfurt, a match where the Italian side is poised as the favorite. Both matches kicked off at noon local time. Excuse me. The Premier League Lacrosse Championship Series starts tomorrow, beginning with round-robin matches between the Atlas and the Whipsnakes, as well as the Archers against the Chrome. This series culminates in the league championships that's coming on February 26th of this year. Russian skater Valieva's doping case to go to sports court. The World Anti-Doping Agency said it has already appealed Russian figure skate Kamila Valieva's doping case to the Court of Arbitration for Sport and is seeking a 4-year ban. The WADA is objecting to a finding by a Russian tribunal that Valieva bore no fault or negligence in the case. Her positive test overshadowed last year's Beijing Olympics. WADA wants a 4-year ban and for Valievsky's results to be disqualified from the date she gave the sample. This would include the Olympics. The Brooklyn Nets and head coach Jacques Vaughn have agreed to a multi-year contract extension. Vaughn has coached the Brooklyn Nets into playoff position despite the trades of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving during another turbulent season for the franchise. Vaughn replaced Steve Nash early in the season, and the Nets announced Tuesday that they were extending his deal. Terms were not disclosed, though general manager Sean Marks said the team looks forward to Vaughn leading the team for years to come. The Nets, who are 34-24, are 5th in the Eastern Conference and have gone 32-19 under Vaughn. That is the 5th best record in the league. That was your sports update. I'm Dennis Shinolu, and thank you for listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow. Now it's time for the comment.
There is a significant gap in the education system when it comes to teaching students with disabilities. People with disabilities face numerous barriers in society and are often excluded from mainstream education. Based on a survey conducted by BCIT Access Society, 58.5% of parents and guardians noted their children experienced incidents of exclusion while their usual support was present. This number indicates there is a serious gap in the skills and training of teachers and support staff. Experts in the field of disability advocacy, such as Tracy Humphreys, who is the executive director of BCIT Access Society, says that learning about disability should be mandatory across curriculums, the same way Indigenous learning has become embedded across all courses in kindergarten to grade 12 and post-secondary. It is time to implement the principle of nothing about us without us in the education system. People with disabilities need to be given space to make decisions in the education field to ensure they are able to learn in a way that is accessible, comfortable, and inclusive. Shivani Joshi, 1680, The Crow.
It's extremely important for people to stay healthy and to stay active as much as possible.
This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
Welcome, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Crow Chronicles. I'm John Park.
And I'm Riley Lung.
In today's episode, we will talk about the impact of BC Hydro's Site C project. This is a massive one.
Well, to start off a little backstory, the Site C project is a massive dam that will flood the Peace River Valley. That's all the way up in northern BC. Construction started in the summer of 2015, and as of 2022, it has costed taxpayers, well over $16 billion so far. And that's $9 billion over the original amount.
Man, imagine all, the maple syrup that you can buy, or,
Okay, we don't always drink maple syrup, okay? Maybe once in a while for
Well, I do
Canadians.
enjoy it, so...
Oh, well, whatever. Well, when it began, BC Hydro has faced many protests over the years, all over BC, especially at the Site C site. Obviously. Especially back in 2019 when the West Morberley First Nations renewed the lawsuit against BC Hydro. And I'm sure many people have seen protesters all over. And the West Morberley is basically the main nation being affected by Site C Dam, especially since the Site C Dam is in their home, the Peace River Valley.
Well, I'm going to add one thing that Riley missed out here. Well, while they do have some troubles with the First Nation group, it is important to remember that the project that they're doing, it will power around 450,000 homes, or 1.7 million electric vehicles per year in British Columbia once this project is completed and is running.
Do you have proof of that?
Well, that is what the BC Hydro is currently claiming in their project overview. But hey, listen to this. They're becoming so efficient with their technology that Site C will generate about 35% of the energy produced at their previous Bennett Dam, with only 5% of the reservoir. So they're becoming very efficient while using so little amount of water. So things are getting better. I mean, it's looking good. It's looking great.
You gotta think about it. Where Site C currently is, that place can feed well over 1 million people, as it's like top tier fertile land. And it used to be a burial site as well, because you had to think about the ethical parts, right? West Morbiley First Nations chief, I interviewed him a little while ago. He's actually talked about this. I'll insert a clip right here. His name is Roland Wilson.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. It's class 1, class 2 agricultural land in the valley here, and it's the only class 1 and class 2 agricultural land. Just for that fact, they should have protected it, saved it for future generations.
Wow, that is so horrible. I mean, wow, it's my first time hearing about this. Thanks for interviewing him, Riley. Well, this is going to make me sound like a really bad person, but I did agree with the person that I interviewed with, and he's a really interesting person. I interviewed Henry Chang, who is a faculty at the Mechanical Engineering Department at BCIT. He knew about the BC Hydro's hydroelectric dam as an engineer, and he talked a lot about moving forward in the future, about how we need more electricity and how we need more EV vehicles. Therefore, we need this dam.
Do you have a clip of that? I need some proof, you know?
Yes, I do, and here's a clip from Henry Chang.
As far as I know, it's a huge project in northern BC, and because we need clean energy in the future forward. We need to have lots of EV, so we need as much as we can. So,
well, isn't that interesting, Shauna?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, now I want to move on to the main topic. In 2019, West Morbiley renewed the lawsuit against Site C, though the project was more than half done. But then again, they still tried to shut it down. But unfortunately, in the end, in 2022, what they got out of it was, oh, we did too much already, we can't back out of it now. Here is what Mr. Wilson has said about it.
Don't build the dam. And Horgan turned around and said, well, we spent too much money, it's too late now, we got to keep going. And they got to argue that in court, but the judges sided with them and didn't side with us on the impact.
I was listening a little bit back on that clip. There was, as part of the interview, he did state that there was other options of obtaining clean electricity. I will also put Mr. Wilson's clip in that as well.
Site C is still not needed. There's other means of acquiring the energy, more effective means of acquiring the energy, cheaper means of acquiring the energy, and the impacts are still too great to the indigenous people of northeastern BC.
Well, Sean, what do you think about that?
Well, he does have a point, but just listen to me for 1 second, okay? So it's not like BC Hydro didn't really consider that as well. They did think about it, and they know that there are other alternative clean resources, such as like thermal generation by using LNG. Like in terms of financially and like the technical difficulty, all that kind of stuff. When they considered all of that aspects, they decided that, well, hydro is really the best way to go. Well, here's the thing, and I'm basing this off from what BC Hydro said, and I quote, "The Site C project provides the best combination for the amount of energy and dependable capacity that Site C can provide if they go through with this instead of using other alternative resources."
The solar, we don't have, it's not a very good place to have solar. And then the winds, and also it's going to be not very suitable in BC here.
Well, just adding on to that point there, well, I know that solar is technically viable in western part of Canada, but it's just that, well, we do have lots of cloudy and dark winters here, and at that point, solar power is not really going to generate much energy at that point. And I heard that they cost up to like, what, 1 million just for like a single cell battery? And that's super expensive, right? And as for wind, oh, don't get me talking about this. Look, there's lots of mountains here in British Columbia, and you can't try to put wind turbines there, but it's going to cause lots of havoc. Like, it's going to cause lots of damage, especially to the rotor blades, because it's mountainous. It's just not a good place to have them. So the only option that we have is really hydro at this point.
Yeah. Well, and solar, I read about it a while ago. Solar panels are like a massive waste. A lot of people say it's like clean, all that stuff. No, it's just as bad as fossil fuels, as they take up a lot of landfill.
I haven't heard of any other side effect apart from Aboriginal people. They have the concern about their ancestors burial the ground. But any project is going to negatively affect some other people.
I also kind of want to talk about when in 2019, West Moberly and 4 other First Nation groups, they went to the UN conference and they presented their the difficulties that the BC government and the Canadian government were putting on them and like what they were doing to their land. Here's an explanation about that.
We had a sit down with them and explain the situation, and they came out with their statement that Site C was actually a racist project. It was environmentally racist, culturally racist, that it actually went against what the UN put forward, asked British Columbia to stop what they were doing. And BC and Canada, they asked them to stop. This isn't just an issue with BC. We have a treaty in place here that's constitutionally protected with Canada.
So the UN actually acknowledged that their rights were violated from Treaty 8, but they really couldn't do anything about it. For those who do not know what Treaty 8 is, it's basically the Canadian government gave a large piece of land spanning 3 provinces, I believe. The First Nation community can exercise their rights. But during the construction of the Site C, BC Hydro and the BC government, they never really consulted, and when they did, it was practically too late. So in this case, their rights were violated heavily in this factor.
The UN said, you guys are in fault, you're wrong, you need to change what you're doing, and UN has no authority over Canada or BC. And they basically just thumbed their nose at the UN and went about. That's one of the sad things. Nobody could hold Canada in check or any other country in check, and they could have pulled sanctions on them, I guess, and squeezed them that way, but nobody was willing to do that for Indians. We're not important enough for them.
Well, Sean, got any questions, any comments? What are your opinions on this?
Well, to begin with, I know that UN has lots of tasks on their hand. But to be fair, that does not excuse them from just glancing over this issue, saying they have no jurisdiction. Well, what's the point of the UN then? The whole point of United Nations was to do something in these kind of situations.
Yeah.
Isn't that the whole point?
Yeah, that is kind of the whole point, is to enforce international law, no?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but in this case, they can't control Canada over anything, as Roland Wilson said in that clip before. The most they could do is just place sanctions on them, which would really do nothing but harm at that point.
Well, but then again, I still like to believe that they should have done something more than just say we can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say to go as far as to place sanctions. I would maybe try to raise awareness and then try to bring something done. Because usually by starting off by trying to gain awareness, that leads to something, and that something can maybe change into a movement so that, well...
Yeah, well, they already do have a movement before. They did have a movement, I'm sure. And it got to the point where they had to go to the UN. But the UN at that point was kind of pointless. Maybe they could have just threatened Canada,
Yeah, I suppose. I think they should have done that, because this story is really just heartbreaking. I knew that the indigenous people were suffering, but I didn't know that they were impacted to this extent. This is very surprising to me. Although I acknowledge how heartbreaking and unfair it is, we cannot change the fact that climate change is imminent. Well, actually, it's already happening, but... Well, in the long run, Site C will be beneficial to us. BC Hydro claims that it can last for over 100 years. Hundreds of years of clean energy. Think about that. And best of all, the sources of all these energies are relatively free compared to fossil fuels. Free as in they're easily obtainable and less expensive. Think about solar. I mean, you're just relying on the sun to get it. And for the wind turbines, well, you're just relying on the wind, right? And for hydro, you are basically relying on gravity to do the work itself, just relying on nature. So, free as in that kind of free.
If we don't do it in the future, it's just much warmer planets which we cannot accept. So I think in this province, hydro we still need to pursue the hydro, although you have this negative environmental impact.
Well, Sean, this topic has been very interesting and conflictive, but I think we should end it off here. I would like to thank the interviewees Roland Wilson and Henry Chang for taking the time to speak with us. And we would like to thank you too for tuning in this episode of The Crow Chronicles. My name is Riley Lung.
And my name is Sean Park. Please check out and follow our social media handles. It's at BCIT_journalism on Twitter and at BCIT News on Instagram and Facebook. And hear more news from me, follow my SoundCloud at SeanPark9004. That's Sean with SEAN. See you next time, folks.